when you first started metal detecting, and just look at your day as a beginner. What was your first idea in your head where you wanted to metal detect, and talk about how that evolved as you progressed in the hobby?
As metal detectorists, we buy our first metal detector. I think we all start in our front yard. You know, if you've never metal detected before, there's something like, okay, I wonder what is out there. And getting out into your front yard and just kind of finding what you lost a couple years ago, or maybe what the previous homeowner lost, or if you're in an old house, maybe, what somebody lost 100 years ago. But that's where getting to know your machine really starts. Learning what different things sound like. And then once you get a good idea of, okay, this sounds kind of like a coin. One game I used to play with myself is, after I've dug a bunch of things, I tried to guess what it was before I dig it with the VDI. The VDI is the number that pops up on the metal detector, for those who don't know. Certain coins will have a certain VDI. Certain coins will sound a certain way, whether it's silver or it's copper or whatever. But when you're out in your front yard and you're learning those things, then that's where it starts to be like, okay, now where can I go? Typically, parks are another good place to go. But for me, it was always about trying to find something really old. I did like to find some things in a park, but for me, it was something getting back into the woods, finding the old home sites, and finding something really old. And like I said earlier, my very first home site that I've ever found was tremendous. I mean, I was finding Indian head pennies, and I found a trime there. It was amazing. And like I said before, I was hooked ever since. But it started in my front yard, and it's evolved into the forest.
Like the forest. Well, a lot of people do like the woods digging, especially because the cellar holes in the woods are probably like the last frontier, right? Because everybody, if there's a house there, everybody's knocked on the door, so to speak. Most of those properties have been hit, so getting out into the woods where you can't necessarily see a home site is probably a good thing. Gene, you guys are on an island. I'm sure your first inclination was the beach.
Yeah. So we, when we were moving here, we got a detector. I bought one on Amazon when we moved here, because if you're on an island, you've got beaches, you have to metal detect. It's kind of a thing, right? And so I just bought a metal detector, a cheap one off of Amazon, and I was at the beach a couple times with it, didn't understand it, and then it rained. If I could tell anybody that was getting into the hobby, I would recommend making sure that it's weatherproof at least, because when it rained on it, that cheap detector was no good anymore. So then I had some Amazon gift cards, and I said, you know what? It's got to be waterproof. So went on and bought the AT Max. Had no clue what I was doing. Bought the AT Max, got it, and that thing is super loud, and we didn't understand it. And we put it in the closet for like 2 years. And then these two right here were late at night. One night, YouTube suggested a video for us. It was a tutorial on how to use that machine. The guy, he's on YouTube still, his name's Ed Huffman. He said, if it's an 81, it's a dime every time. And they kind of looked at each other. They went out into the front yard. They swung until they found an 81. They dug it up, and it was a dime. And that was it, man. We're hooked too, It's doesn't get any better than that. Kind of when you get it figured out, when you understand it, you're like, oh, because before that it's just beeps and squeals, and I didn't know, and I was digging sometimes and couldn't find stuff. Yeah, once I got it figured out, that was it. And then like Jerry, I really enjoy digging up the old stuff, man. I really love it.
Back to location, the beach is just so tricky. It really is. You have to have the right detector. You have to have the right equipment. If you have a detector that's not multi-frequency, you can only really do the dry sand. And up there, things sink so fast, you're not really going to find much. You have to have a multi-frequency detector, which is not cheap. You got to have a scoop, not cheap. So all the stuff we were doing without, and we would never find stuff at the beach, so we kind of give up on that. But now that we have all that stuff, and even the location itself, like different beaches are good at different times of the year, and different beaches have more stuff and have less traffic, and some of them have more traffic and less stuff. And so you just have to, it's a whole thing with location at the beach.
Know
The
where
beach
you're
is
going.
a different beast. If you're going to a farm, it's the same every time, except for maybe if it rained or not, But the beach,
Soil. Soil's different everywhere.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
the
So
beach-
yeah, that was, that's another thing that, I don't think people realize that, and I didn't realize that the sand was different, in different beaches, different times of the year. I didn't understand that. I just figured the sand was like the dirt because I don't get to dig in the sand that often. Rich, where was your first experience digging, and how did you evolve from there?
So, I mean, my dad, when I was younger, I was probably 9 or 10, he bought like a Radio Shack one. It was just a cheap, but I had it all the way until like 4 years ago, literally. Like it was just I had it. It was never used for a long period of time, but I used it every so often. We did his house. And then I think it was a year before COVID hit. I actually was just like, man, I really want to get into this hobby. I was watching actually the Hoover Boys, and it was just getting you more into it, wanting to get back out. I'm like, God, if I just had a better detector, I would be more interested in it and actually wanting to do it more. Because I knew that I was having a hard time, even with the one I had. Just the signals were like, it didn't matter what I was digging. I knew it was going to be something, but it was just, you couldn't tell what it was. So with a cheaper detector, it's a lot harder to figure out what you're actually digging. So then it was actually, my first machine was the AT Max. I went and I convinced my wife. I said, this would be a great hobby for me and my daughter at the time. So I said, what if I get her like a cheaper one and I get a better one? And then that way we can go out and have time together. And she's like, okay. So we ended up being able to, that was my way of getting it, in a way, like kind of cheating the system in a way. But anyways, besides that, but it turned into so much more, because within that year of doing it, I was like practicing in my yard. I practiced in the neighbor's yard, and I was finding silver and like just learning the machine was just insane. Like it was fun. Like I was enjoying trying to learn the numbers and everything like that. And then the whole YouTube thing started, and that was when I was like, wow, I'm ready to go. Like let's do it. I was still very amateur even at the beginning, but it was so much fun. And the places I was trying to find, I mean, I didn't know where to start. I wasn't a door like knocking on someone's house. I mean, I did my neighbors' yards, but it was a lot easier just to, hey, is it okay if I, metal detect in your yard? And they're like, yeah, cool. I didn't really even want to go to parks because I knew that was only going to be like modern change and stuff like that. So it was like really hard. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, meeting up with these guys was a big difference, because then it got me out, and then I became like the person that talks to people at the doors too. So it really takes you out of your shell. Jerry introduced us to wood hunts, which was totally a different beast than doing yards all the time. We don't do too many parks because, well, once again, it's just not our cup of tea. A lot of people it is, and they love it. And for us, it's just not. Like, we just don't do parks that often, just because, unless there was history there and we knew where it was in that area, then we would. But like a general park to go to a tot lot or anything like that, that wasn't our thing to do, which I'm not against it. It's great for other people to learn, but for us, it wasn't the same thing. And that's where it progressed into going into yards, then woods. But I'm addicted no matter what. We've only done beach hunting once, so we didn't do bad. I mean, got a couple pieces of jewelry, and that was a fun one because like we ended up all being there at the same time without even knowing we were going to be there. Actually, it was kind of funny.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah,
but,
that's really
yeah,
that's really cool. My first experience with a metal detector, I was 8 years old, and I traveled with my stepdad and my stepbrother, and they would go play competitive baseball at different parks. I was sitting there watching the game, bored out of my mind. I'd spent all my concession money for the day, and we still had a couple hours to go. And I looked over, and quote unquote the weird guy in the park, there was a guy standing down there on the right field line, away from everybody, swinging this big ugly contraption. And being an 9-year-old kid, I'm like, hey, what's this guy doing? Because I didn't want to watch baseball anymore. That's all I ever did was watch baseball. I went down there and I got within about 15 foot of him, and I just sit there and I sit down and I watched him, and he'd dig up a dime or a nickel or a quarter, and I asked him how much money he had found, and he said, well, I found about $3 or $4 today. And I'm sitting here thinking, wow, $3 or $4, and I can get more candy and soda at the concession stand while I sit here and be bored over the weekend. So I took that home and went and talked to my mom. She went up to Radio Shack and got me something that was, I think it was called an Eagle Eye, and it had the sensitivity dial on it, and it was white with a little bullseye hole in the center. And I used to crawl around underneath the bleachers at these ballparks and scratch change out of the ground. I learned how to, you could set the sensitivity real low, and you could just kind of go through there, and whenever it made a noise, you take your little shovel and scratch the ground. Well, that's how I got hooked. I did it for a few years that way until I started playing baseball. And then after I started playing baseball, it went away. You know, I playing competitive baseball, becoming a teenager, you know, you're not playing in the dirt anymore in that aspect. And I was 41 years old, 40 years old. And, you know, my kids were growing up, and my wife was like, you got to get out of the house. You got to find something else to do. You're driving me nuts. I picked up a metal detector again, and it was something that I've always wanted to do. And I found somebody that dug. You know, I'm one of those people that I don't like asking anybody for anything. I've never been that person. I've always found a way to survive on my own. So I had a hard time with permissions, but I don't mind helping people. And this guy, Kurt, that I dig with, is a lot like Shane Kubat. He has very little eyesight left. Well, I go pick him up, and he calls himself the Silver-Tongued Devil because he can convince people to let him do anything. So I took him around for a few years, and then my mother became interested, and she was like, you know, and instead of showing her, I borrowed Nick's GoPro, and then I started making videos. And like Gene said, all of a sudden other people started commenting on your videos when you upload them, and you don't even expect it. And so there, you know, you get, I started out digging in parks. I didn't really have very good spot at home to dig. You know, parks was really where I started, and Kurt turned me on to a whole new world of hey, this is where you can find old stuff. And then I was a history nerd to begin with, and therefore it all just clicked, you know, one thing after the other. Once I learned that I could do research and then go out and find something off my research and make my weekend that much better, I was completely sold. And I've been a complete animal and an addict ever since, and I couldn't be happier with it. So that's basically how that all worked out, and pretty proud of it. You know, everything that I do, I do it with pride. So it's a lot of fun. You know,
one thing that is in that I wanted to, before we get past it, by the way, anything worth doing is worth doing right. You know, the unexpected benefit from this hobby, you know, drawing our family closer together. You know, you said, you know, you convinced your wife by saying, hey, my daughter and I, but I'm serious. For anybody that's starting out in this hobby, that is part of it. Like, get your kids interested, get them off of the, you know, tablets and all that stuff, man. It's just good. And introduce them to history and, you know, the curiosity. It's just, I see so many positives out of it, and that's one of them.
And the other one, though, I do have to highlight that is, you know, not just the family part. I have made these other three guys that I'm with, they're my brothers. Like, I will drop anything. If they need something, I'm there. He lives an hour away from me. I'll drive. If he needs something, I would. It's funny is I never had too many like the friends before, but now the friends that we have between the four of us is just, it's unreal. Like, we get our families together. It's not just us, it's our whole families are friends. And that's what's so much, I don't know. It's awesome. It's the community that we make in there. So,
yeah, the community within the community, right? You know, your personal, you know, most metal detectorists, I feel, are kind of introverted. I feel like they're kind of solo guys. And then once you find a couple good friends that you can go out and share with, you know, I feel like we're that type of people then where, you know, bonding is important. You know, people that go out by themselves and dig all the time, I don't see them as having any fun with it. I really don't. So, you know, we recreate our own community and then our own brotherhood, and now we've got a bigger brotherhood and a bigger one because we've got this platform that we can all talk to one another And I think that's the amazing part. That's the reason why we're here today. And it definitely leads me right into the next question. And I think it's Gene's turn to go first. And if tomorrow, if you were going out detecting and you were picking up and taking a new detectorist with you, what would be the first piece of advice you would give him, and how would you help get him started in the right way to where he could fall in love with the hobby just like you?
It's kind of funny. Today while we were out, I had a guy. His name was Frankie. He came up to me. He was like, "Hey, I've been over here watching you. I just got some questions, And everybody has the same kind of thoughts. When you get into this, how much do you make? Do you ever find anything valuable? And if I was taking somebody for the very first time, which we've done over several different times, it just be ready to be putting in tons of work and not seeing a whole lot out of it. You may go and not dig anything. Just don't give up. That's kind of what I would say is the biggest thing, because I think so many people do, like where we were. They didn't understand the machine. They didn't know what they were doing, and just kind of gave up. Yeah, the wrong area, that kind of thing. So, if I was taking somebody with me, I'd try to teach them these things ahead of time, because again, we're relatively new to the hobby. So I would try to give them some of those pointers so they don't have to kind of wallow as long as we did in our ignorance, I guess is the best way to put it. So yeah, just don't give up, man. Just stick with it, and I promise it's going to be good. Again, you kind of have to know their personality if they're going to enjoy it, and then also do they enjoy history and that sort of thing. But yeah, don't give up. That's the biggest thing.
What do you say, Jerry?
So the people that I've taken out that for the very first time, I think that the big thing that they have to do is they have to have a nice level sweep. And then what I would encourage them to do, or what I would have them do before they even started detecting on the ground, I would actually throw coins on the ground, and I would have them sweep over it, and I would show them what they're listening for. They want a good repeating tone in every direction. And because if you give anybody a metal detector and go out there and they just start sweeping back and forth, they're gonna hear tones. There ain't no doubt about it. They're gonna hear iron, they're gonna hear mid tones, they're gonna hear high tones, and really training their ear to it as quickly as they can so they don't get frustrated is the most important thing. So throwing coins on the ground and having that detector bing, 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 bing as you go back and forth, so it registers in their brain, okay, this is what I need to listen to when I'm out there detecting, because like I said, they're going to hear tones. And when they hear a tone, that's when because we know to do it, we hone in on it, and then we're trying to figure it out. Okay, is this a tone that I would dig? They say dig them all, but you don't necessarily dig them all, because you can get in the woods and you're going to hear all kinds of stuff. But hearing that repeating tone, if you can teach them that, then they're going to dig some stuff out of the ground.
Go ahead, Rich.
So I guess if I was taking someone out, if I was providing the detector, I'd give them something decent. It's really hard to, like, a lot of people, they want to go out and they want to, I just got a bounty hunter, which I'm not against bounty hunters by no means. I'm just saying, like our old Radio Shacks that just had the little meter went like this, those are hard to use. And the biggest one, like Gene said, you can't be discouraged just because you can't figure it out. Like, every time it beeps, it's going to be something. You can't really discern on what it is, because it's really hard. Those are really hard to learn. Just taking your time with it. I actually just went camping Easter weekend. There was a guy I just happened to be walking my dogs, and I heard a beep beep, and I was like, oh, cool, someone's detecting somewhere. So, and I told him he couldn't actually detect there, but I was just letting him informational. But besides that, I talked to him. He goes, I just picked this up, and it was a bounty hunter. It had just a little tiny meter going, and I just told him, I said, and I go, so what have you dug so far? Like, how have you done? And he said, so I've gotten a lot of, pull tabs and aluminum. And I said, well, don't get discouraged. And I told him, I said, I'm not going to say your detector's bad, but I am going to say that if you upgraded a detector, then you would end up being able to tell what things are. And, I proved it to him. I put the pull tab on the ground, and I threw a penny on the ground, and I threw a quarter on the ground. Now the quarter was ringing up a little bit higher, but other than that, they all sounded the same. So it's really hard to pick out what you're going to pick out. Like for us, we know when you're swinging, you're at least going to hear. I can tell you that it's something going to be. It's not going to be iron, or it's going to be a precious metal and or silver or a quarter, or you're able to discern what those things are over time. But like for some of the cheaper detectors, it is very hard to do, and there are very good entry level detectors that are just a little bit more than those $100 ones that you got from the Discovery Channel or Harbor Freight, or however, that you can get a good detector actually for like $250 that actually gives you those VDI numbers, which is huge because that's how you learn. I mean, there's a lot of tones that still sound the same even on ours. It's those VDI numbers that cause a big change our opinion on what we're digging. So taking your time, do not get discouraged. And the other one is, I always encourage them, if they are going to come out, get a pinpointer. It is a game changer. This guy didn't have one, and I was like, so you're having a hard time finding this stuff? He goes, yeah, I keep digging, and I go, pinpointers are everything. I mean, they don't tell you what it is, but it makes it a lot easier finding the piece that you're looking for. So yeah, we love talking to kids. Kids are our biggest one when we go out detecting in yards. We end up having kids follow us. They're literally running from one hole to the next, like to see what we're finding. Oh, what'd you get? And we normally give it to them, but they get so interested. And there's been so many times that the kids are so interested from us doing it in their yard that they have their parents want us to hook them up and find a good detector for them. And we normally get them a good entry level, but not too expensive. I mean, I'm not going to say go buy $1,000 detector because it's better. Well, if I just handed someone that had no idea what they were doing $1,000 detector, they're going to have the same problem with a $100 detector because they don't know what they're doing. So that entry level one helps you get into learning that, and you're not spending nearly as much. So
yeah, especially today, man. Those entry level detectors, like you said, there are some that are still entry level, but they're just so much better. They're user friendly. They're durable.
Simplex,
Yeah.
for example.
Simplex is good. Even that new Xterra Pro from MindLab supposedly is awesome. I mean, I've heard so many good things about it already, and it's cheap. I think it's only like $250. I mean, that's a great entry level. And that's actually has better VDI than the Knox 800. I mean, it's just for the price that you're getting it at, it's so amazing, and it's waterproof. Like it's a perfect entry level. It's waterproof. It's multi-frequency. There's so many things for $250. It's really good. So
you found that entry level battleground between a couple of the detecting companies, because the best thing about that is that, and then I'll give you my answer, is that when you got two companies that are trying to create the best entry level detector, competition breeds. You can buy something for a better price, you can get a better piece of equipment, and then other people are going to start throwing away stuff because there's so many new detectors on the market. You can get something secondhand pretty dang cheap right now, and you can upgrade pretty easily. I know a lot of people that are letting go of their Equinox 6 and 800s just because they think that the new 7 and 9 are better, or they're upgrading to a Manicore. So there's a lot of stuff out there available. I love everybody's answers on that one. I will just elaborate and go just one step further. That positive reinforcement when you're on the hunt, making sure that person has a good time that day, regardless of what comes out of the ground. When Brian and I go hunting Higgles, we have an absolute blast. It doesn't matter what we dig. It doesn't matter where we go. It doesn't matter, how bad the day can end up. We make sure that we have fun. And I think that positive reinforcement, if I was taking somebody out, I'd want them to have that same experience, because all things considered, at the end of the day, they may not have found treasure, which we find treasure maybe 15-20% of the time, but they had a bonding day, a growing day. They learned a little something, and hopefully that they want to go back and do it the next time.
It's like golf. Golf's expensive to start. You may not be good at it, but you have a blast going out for the day with the guys, and gotten out there for 18 holes. I don't golf, but I'm just saying it's the same type of thing. It's like doesn't really matter if you're good at it or not. You just have fun out there, and then they can pick on you for having a really bad swing. So
Yeah, it really starts with that mindset in the beginning.
Yeah.
Are you going into it to find value? Find lots of valuables, or are you going into it because you're trying to try something new? Have fun with it. Your perspective is going to be a big determiner.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that perspective that you're going in and you're going to find, oh my gosh, because that is like the question that people ask right away is, so what's your favorite find? How valuable is it? So it's hard to answer that question. What's your favorite find? I mean, honestly, well, what do you mean? Coin, relic, buttons? Like, there's so many categories. To me, I couldn't really tell you my favorite find. It's so hard to say. And then they're like, well, do you sell your stuff? I'm like, no. And they're like, well, why do you do it then? I'm like, well, because I really like sacred history, and I put it all into, like, I actually categorize it and label everything I find and where I found it, because it's just, to me, it's saving history, and it's so much better than just and I don't find treasure all the time. Ask Jerry. I mean, they went out, they got 5 Drake bust large cents, between 3 large cents and 2 half cents. Ask him how much I got. Big old goose egg.
It wasn't
the
his
whole
day.
I literally came home with nothing, but I had so much fun watching them find stuff. And I did most of the filming that day because it was just like one of those things. It was just like they kept finding stuff. I'm like, and I even say in the video, I'm like, well, maybe I'll get something this one of these days. So like it's just, sometimes it's discouraging, but like I still had so much fun. It didn't matter if I found anything or not. It's the joy of being out there. So